الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلوات الله وسلامه عليه وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So we continue, ya ikhwan, Allah yubarik feekum, with our reading through this tremendous work of Shaykh al-Walid, Shaykh Rabee ibn Haddee al-Madkhali, Hafidahullah Ta'ala, and as translated by Shaykh Abu Talha Dawood Burbank, Rahimahullah Ta'ala, Rahmatan Wasi'ah. And we reached the part where the Shaykh Hafidahullah, Shaykh Rabee, that he began to outline for us and detail for us some examples of the da'wah and the call of some of the prophets and messengers. And we had previously mentioned the example of the da'wah of Nuh alayhi salam. And now he goes on, Hafidahullah Ta'ala, to mention the second example. And that is wherein he said, Hafidahullah Ta'ala, وَثَانِيُهُمْ أَبُو الْأَنْبِيَاءِ وَإِمَامُ الْمُوَحِّدِينَ الْحُنَفَاءِ Ibrahim Khalil Allah. That the second of them is the father of all of the prophets, and he is the Imam of the Muwahhideen, the Imam and the leader of those who worship Allah Azza wa Jal alone upon the true religion, Ibrahim, who was the Khalil of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, الذي أمر الله سيد المرسلين وخاتم النبيين وأمته باتباعه, the one who Allah Azza wa Jal, he ordered the best of the messengers and the final prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his ummah to emulate him and to take his call as an example and to follow his way and methodology. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah al-An'am, وَإِذْ قَالَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ لِأَبِيهِ آزَرَ أَتَتَّخِذُ أَصْنَامًا آلِهَةً إِنِّي أَرَاكَ وَقَوْمَكَ فِي ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ. And remember when Ibrahim said to his father Azar, will you take these idols for worship? Indeed, I see that you and those who worship idols along with you are upon clear error. وَكَذَلِكَ نُرِي إِبْرَاهِيمَ مَلَكُوتَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَلِيَكُونَ مِنَ الْمُوقِنِينَ. And likewise we showed Ibrahim the heavens and the earth and how they are a proof that the Creator alone should be worshipped, so that he should be of those who have faith and certainty. فَلَمَّا جَنَّ عَلَيْهِ اللَّيْلُ رَأَى كَوْكَبًا قَالَ هَذَا رَبِّي فَلَمَّا أَفَلَ قَالَ لَا أُحِبُّ الْآفِلِينَ. So when the night covered him with darkness, he saw a star and said, هَذَا رَبِّي, this is my Lord. And as Shaykh Abu Talha rahimahullah ta'ala, that he puts here in brackets an explanation of this ayah, that when the night covered him with darkness and he saw a star, he said, this is my Lord, as an argument to show his people the error of what they were doing. He said this statement as an argument to show his people the error of worshipping anything besides Allah Azza wa Jal. So he said, هَذَا رَبِّي, this is what you claim to be my Lord. So he said this, as some of the ulama in the books of tafsir mention, that he said this in order to dispute with his people and to show the falsehood of their claim. So he said, هَذَا رَبِّي, this is what you claim to be my Lord. Then when it set, he said, I do not love that which passes away and passes by. Then he said subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَلَمَّا رَأَى الْقَمَرَ بَازِغًا قَالَ هَذَا رَبِّي فَلَمَّا أَفَلَ قَالَ لَئِن لَّمْ يَهْدِنِي رَبِّي لَأَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الْقَوْمِ الضَّالِّينَ. Then when he saw the moon rising up, he said, this is what you claim to be my Lord. Then when it set, he said, if my Lord did not keep me firm upon the guidance, then I would surely be one of the misguided. فَلَمَّا رَأَى الشَّمْسَ بَازِغَةً قَالَ هَذَا رَبِّي هذا أكبر فلما أفلت قال يا قوم إني بريء مما تشركون. Then when he saw the sun, he said, this is what you claim to be my Lord, and this is greater than the others. Then when it set, he said, O my people, I am free from all that you associate as partners in worship with Allah. إني وجهت وجهي للذي فطر السماوات والأرض حنيفا وما أنا من المشركين. And I've turned my face in worship to him who has created the heavens and the earth, making all my worship purely for him. And I am not from those who worship anything besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, Shaykh Rabee hafidhahullah ta'ala, he comments on these ayat and he says, دعوة حارة قوية متدفقة إلى توحيد الله وإخلاص الدين له ونبذ الشرك ورفضه. That this was a fervent, vigorous and insistent call to the tawheed of Allah and to make all of religion purely for him, and to the elimination and rejection of shirk. تبدأ بالأسرة وتمتد إلى الأمة تحارب الشرك والأصنام. It begins with the family. This da'wah and this call to the tawheed of Allah Azza wa Jal, it begins with the family first, and then it extends to the nations, waging war upon shirk and the idols. وتزلزل الشرك بالكواكب, and shaking the very foundations of attribution of any worship to the stars. As Ibrahim alayhi salam, that he negated the worship of anything besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, showing that these stars, that they are not to be worshipped besides him Jalla Jalaluh. ويسلك خليل الله أقوم الطريق في المناظرة والمحاجة. So the chosen and beloved friend of Allah, Ibrahim alayhi salam, he proceeded upon the soundest way in debating and arguing in order to establish Allah's proofs and to refute shirk and to show its fallacy and reject the doubts that are used to support it. فالتعبير بالأصنام تحقير لآلهتهم. So his use of the word asnam, his use of the word idols, that he referred to them as idols, that this shows contempt for their phony and supposed gods, and these false and supposed gods. وتسفيه لأحلامهم ورصده للكواكب المذكورة واحدا واحدا. And he exposed their foolishness, and he observed the aforementioned celestial bodies one after the other, yani the stars, the moon and the sun. Each one succeeded the previous one, which set and became absent, faded and became absent, in order to use their condition as a clear proof of the fallacy and the falsehood of their having any divinity or right to be worshipped, as these people claimed. And how can they be worshipped when they themselves have not even remained? They've gone and set and become absent. فَمَنْ يَرْعَاهُمْ وَيَحْفَظُهُمْ وَيُدَبِّرُ شُؤُونَهُمْ وَشُؤُونَ هَذَا الْكَوْنِ حِينَ غِيَابِهَا وَأُفُولِهَا. So who was it who protected and guarded them and controlled their affairs and the affairs of the creation when they had passed and set? وَإِذَنْ فَعَلَيْهِمْ أَنْ يَرْفُضُوا هذه الآلهة المزعومة الباطلة ويكفروا بها وينفضوا أيديهم منها. Therefore they must reject the false divinity and right to worship which they claimed for them, and they must disbelieve in that. There's upon them to wash their hands off them, to wash their hands off those idols and those stars and that which they worship besides Allah Azza wa Jal. And upon them is to rather turn to Him, that they turn to their true Ilah, الذي فطر السماوات والأرض الذي لا يغيب ولا يحول ويعلم جميع أحوالهم ومطلع على حركاتهم وسكناتهم. The one who He subhanahu wa ta'ala created and brought into existence the entire heavens and the earth. He who does not pass away or depart. He who knows all about their condition and is fully aware of all of their movements and even their periods of rest. He who protects and preserves them and controls their affairs. حجج قوية يستمدها من الواقع الملموس والكون المنظور. So these were strong proofs that He alayhi salam extracted from the situation that they experienced and the visible creation. He gave them those tangible proofs that they themselves could see by reflecting on their own situation and the visible creation, the creation that is apparent to them, that this was the example of His da'wah alayhi salam, that He brought to His people clear proofs that they cannot argue against, not bringing them philosophical points, but rather using that which they can see in front of them, those clear evidences from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and those signs that He has placed within His creation, Jalla Jalalu. And then the Shaykh Hafidallahu ta'ala, that he brings the ayat from Surah Maryam, when Allah Azza wa Jal said, وَاذْكُرْ فِي الْكِتَابِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ إِنَّهُ كَانَ صِدِّيقًا نَبِيًّا. And remember and recite to your people from the book, in the Quran, about Ibrahim alayhi salam. And he was one who was fully truthful and a prophet sent by Allah Azza wa Jal. إذ قال لأبيه يا أبت لما تعبد ما لا يسمع ولا يبصر ولا يغني عنك شيئا. When he said, O my father, why do you worship that which cannot hear, nor see, nor benefit you, nor remove any harm from you at all? يا أبت إني قد جاءني من العلم ما لم يأتك فاتبعني أهدك صراطا سويا. O my father, Allah has given me knowledge which has not come to you, so accept the sincere advice that I give you, and I will show you the straight way and the straight path. يا أبت لا تعبد الشيطان إن الشيطان كان للرحمن عصيا. O my father, do not worship the shaitan. Do not worship the shaitan, and by obeying him in his call that you worship idols. For indeed shaitan is one disobedient to Ar-Rahman, to the most merciful, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. يا أبت إني أخاف أن يمسك عذاب من الرحمن فتكون للشيطان وليا. O my father, I fear for you, knowing that if you die upon attributing partners to Allah Azza wa Jal in worship, and upon worship of the shaitan, that Allah's punishment and torment will be upon you, and you will merely be a companion of the shaitan in the hereafter. وَلَعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. So he replied, his father replied and said, قَالَ أَرَاغِبٌ أَنْتَ عَنْ آلِهَتِي يَا إِبْرَاهِيمُ لَإِن لَمْ تَنْتَهِ لَأَرْجُمَنَّكِ وَاهْجُرْنِي مَلِيًّا. He replied and said, do you reject my gods, O Ibrahim? And if you do not cease abusing and reviling them, I will certainly revile you. Go away from me if you wish to remain safe from me. قَالَ سَلَامٌ عَلَيْكَ. So Ibrahim alayhi salam said in response to him, سَلَامٌ عَلَيْكَ سَأَسْتَغْفِرُ لَكَ رَبِّي إِنَّهُ كَانَ بِي حَفِيًّا. but you are safe from me harming you, and I will rather ask my Lord to guide you and forgive your sins. He has always been most gracious and kind to me. وأعتزلكم وما تدعون من دون الله وأدعو ربي عسى ألا أكون بدعاء ربي شقيا. I shall keep away from you and all that you worship besides Allah, and I will worship and invoke my Lord, making all of my worship sincerely for Him, and I hope that I shall not be one unblessed in my worship and supplications. فلما اعتزلهم وما يعبدون من دون الله وهبنا له إسحاق ويعقوب وكلا جعلنا نبيا. So when he separated himself from them and all that they worship besides Allah Azza wa Jal, we gave him a family who were better than them, Ishaq and Yaqub, and we made all of them prophets. Subhanallah. وَوَهَبَنَا لَهُم مِّن رَحْمَتِنَا وَجَعَلْنَا لَهُمْ لِسَانَ صِدْقٍ عَلِيًّا. And we bestowed our mercy upon them all and granted them renown and praise upon the tongues of the people. And Shaykh Rabee Hafidullah Ta'ala says in commentary upon these ayat, دعوة حارة إلى التوحيد. So this was a fervent call to Tawheed, قائمة على العلم والمنطق والعقل وعلى الخلق القويم. And it was a da'wah that was established firmly upon knowledge, reason and intellect, and upon good and sound manners. It was a da'wah that was established upon knowledge, upon reason and intellect, and upon good and sound manners. وتهدي الضال إلى الصراط المستقيم يقابلها تعصب أعمى يقوم على الهوى والجهل والعناد والمكابرة. It was a da'wah that guides the misguided to the straight path, and it was opposed by blind bigotry and partisanship based upon desires, ignorance, stubbornness, and obstinate pride. Otherwise, how could anyone in their right mind worship and humble themselves to those that cannot even hear, nor see, nor help them in any way? Where's the intellect and sound reasoning and logic in relation to that? إن علم التوحيد أيها القارئ هو العلم الذي يعتز به جميع الأنبياء. So indeed, the knowledge of Tawheed, أيها القارئ, O reader, is that knowledge which all of the prophets were honored with. They were honored with the knowledge of Tawheed, and with it they assaulted falsehood. They fought against falsehood and ignorance and shirk. فالجهل بهذا العلم علم الأنبياء الهادي إلى الحق والمنقذ من الضلال والشرك هو الجهل المميت والسم القاتل الذي يقتل العقل والفكر. And without doubt, ignorance of this knowledge that was carried by the prophets, this knowledge that guides to the truth and saves from misguidance and shirk, ignorance of this is fatal. It is fatal, and it is a deadly poison which kills the intellect and the ability to think. يا أبت إني قد جاءني من العلم ما لم يأتك فاتبعني أهدك صراطا سويا. O my father, Allah has given me knowledge which has not come to you, so accept the sincere advice which I give you, and I will show you to the straight way. وبعد هذه الجولات القوية الواعية يقوم بها إبراهيم صلى الله عليه وسلم في ميدان الدعوة إلى الله دعوة الأسرة والأمة التي أقام فيها على أبيه وقومه الحجج الدامغة Then after those robust efforts in da'wah, after these robust efforts in da'wah by Ibrahim alayhi salam in calling to Allah Azza wa Jal, calling the family, calling the entire nation, establishing these irrefutable proofs upon his father and his people. And after this he took this great call and confronted that haughty and tyrannical ruler who claimed divinity. He faced him with full strength and bravery. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Surah Al-Baqarah, أَلَمْ تَرَ إِلَى الَّذِي حَاجَّ إِبْرَاهِيمَ فِي رَبِّهِ أَنْ آتَاهُ اللَّهُ الْمُلْكَ إِذْ قَالَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ رَبِّيَ الَّذِي يُحْيِي وَيُمِيتُ قَالَ أَنَا أُحْيِي وَأُمِيتُ قال إبراهيم فإن الله يأتي بالشمس من المشرق فأت بها من المغرب فبهت الذي كفر والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين. When he said subhanahu wa ta'ala, do you not consider the one, Nimrod, who because Allah had granted him an extended kingdom, that he disputed with Ibrahim about his Lord? So Ibrahim said to him that it is my Lord who gives life and death. So he said, أَنَا أُحْيِي وَأُمِيتُ, that I give life and death. So Ibrahim said that Allah causes the sun to rise from the east. So if you are truthful, then cause it to rise from the west. That Allah Azza wa Jal is the one who causes the sun to rise from the east. So if you are truthful, then cause it to rise from the west. So the unbeliever was confounded, was shown to be a liar. And Allah does not guide the unbelievers. وَلَقَدْ دَعَا إِبْرَاهِيمُ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامُ هَذَا الطَّاغِيَةَ الْمُتَأَلَّهِ إِلَى تَوْحِيدِ اللَّهِ وَالْإِيمَانِ بِرُبُوبِيَّتِهِ وَأُلُوهِيَّتِهِ فَطَغَى وَاسْتَكْبَرَ عَنِ الْإِجَابَةِ إِلَى تَوْحِيدِ اللَّهِ وَأَبَى التَّنَازُلَ عَنْ دَعْوَى الرُّبُوبِيَّةِ. So Ibrahim alayhi salam, he called this tyrant, this tyrannical ruler Nimrod, the one who had claimed for himself divinity, to the tawheed of Allah and to iman in his lordship, but he exceeded all bounds in his arrogance and haughtiness, and he refused to accept the tawheed of Allah Azza wa Jal and to give up on his claim to lordship. So Ibrahim debated with him in this brilliant manner, whose proof was clear. Ibrahim said that it is my Lord who gives life and death. فحاجه إبراهيم وناظره هذه المناظرة النيرة البراهين الواضحة المعالم. قال إبراهيم ربي الذي يحيي ويميت. So Ibrahim debated with him in this excellent and brilliant manner, whose proof was clear. Ibrahim said alayhi salam, it is my Lord who gives life and death. It is my Lord who gives life and death. Meaning that he alone subhanahu wa ta'ala is singled out with the creation, with the ability to create, and with control of the affairs, and with causing life and causing death. فقال الغبي المتجبر. So this ignorant and foolish tyrant replied and said, أنا أحيي وأميت, that I too can cause life and give death. أي أقتل من أردت قتله وأستبقي من أردت إبقاءه. And what he meant by this statement is that I can kill whomsoever I please, I can cause death by killing whomsoever I please, and I can give life by sparing whosoever I please. That this was his foolish answer. وهذا الجواب فيه تمويه وتضليل للأغبياء وحيدة عن الجواب. This answer of his was merely a pretense and a means of fooling the ignorant, and it was a way of him avoiding the question. لأن قصد إبراهيم عليه الصلاة والسلام أن ربه ينشئ الحياة في الإنسان والحيوان والنبات من العدم. Because the intent of Ibrahim alayhi salam was that his Lord, was the fact that his Lord created mankind and animals and plants and gave life to them, brought them into existence from absolutely nothing. ويردها إلى الأموات بقدرته. And he subhanahu wa ta'ala will likewise return them to nothing. He will cause them to die with his power. وأنه هو الذي يميت الناس والحيوانات بآجالها بأسباب ربطها وبغير أسباب. Because he subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who gives the humans and the animals death at the end of their appointed lifespans due to visible causes which he shows, and also without any visible cause subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when Ibrahim saw that he tried to create a pretense and evade the issue, which might fool some of the ignorant and common folk, قال ملزما له بتصديق قولي إن كان كما يزعم فإن الله يأتي بالشمس من المشرق فأتي بها من المغرب فبهت الذي كفر. So Ibrahim alayhi salam said to him, as a means of showing how futile and foolish his argument was, that if you are as you claim, then Allah causes the sun to rise from the east. So if you are truthful, then cause it to rise from the west. So the unbeliever was confounded. He was void of any evidence and argument. أي وقف متحيرا مشدوها منقطع الحجة. So the unbeliever was left confounded and at a loss for words. His argument was overthrown and he was silenced, and falsehood was rendered futile, as is always the case. إن الباطل كان زهوقا. The falsehood is always rendered futile. So the Shaykh says, Hafidallah Ta'ala, that within this no doubt is a lesson, that this contains a lesson for those who listen attentively and witness it, that the call to Tawheed represents the peak of sincerity, wisdom and intelligence. It proceeds in the due and correct manner, as Allah Azza wa Jal has willed, not merely struggling for kingship, nor seeking to fight for leadership. That within this is a lesson, that this da'wah and the call to Tawheed, that it represents the peak of sincerity, wisdom and intelligence. It is built upon these three affairs: sincerity, wisdom and intelligence. And it is not a da'wah to acquire any type of kingship or to fight for leadership. Why? Because if the goal of Ibrahim alayhi salam had been to attain rulership and authority, then he would have taken a different methodology to this. And he would have found people who gathered around him and supported him. But Allah refuses, and His prophets and the pious callers from the true followers of the prophets in every time and place, they all refuse except to follow the way of guidance and truth, and to clearly proclaim the truth, and to establish the proof against the proud and obstinate. So Ibrahim alayhi salam established this great obligation in the best and most complete manner. He established the proof upon his father and his people, upon those who governed them, and upon all of his nation, that he stood firm alayhi salam, and he focused on establishing the proof against them. Then when he saw that they were persisting in their shirk and their unbelief, and were established upon falsehood and misguidance, he resorted to censor and correction by means of the hand and use of strength. So where did these change and correction begin? As the Shaykh Hafidallah Ta'ala said, فَمِنْ أَيْنَ يَبْدَأُ بِالتَّغْيِيرِ وَمَا هُوَ الْأُسْلُوبِ الرَّشِيدِ لِتَغْيِيرِ هَذَا الْوَاقِعِ الْمُظْلَمِ الْجَاثِمِ عَلَى أُمَّتِي. So how did he start this change? Alayhi salam. And it's an important point, because this is where many go wrong and have ignorance of. The Ibrahim alayhi salam that where did his change and correction begin? And what was the correct and rightly guided means for correction of the dire situation which had beset his nation? How did he bring about change? أيثور على الدولة? Did he revolt against the government? Was this his da'wah? لأنها منبع الشرور والفساد ومصدر الشرك والضلال? Did he then go out and try to overthrow and revolt against the government because it was the root of all evil and corruption and the source of shirk and misguidance? كيف لا والحاكم يدعي الربوبية ويصر عليها? And how could that ever be denied? The government at the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam, the ruler, those who were in authority, how can it be denied that they were the source of misguidance and corruption and the source of shirk and misguidance? Because the ruler himself claimed lordship. He claimed lordship for himself and persisted in that claim even after Ibrahim alayhi salam had confronted him. So why is it the case that Ibrahim did not consider a revolution against them? Why did he not resort to a revolution and uprising against this unbelieving government? And at the head of it, a tyrant, Nimrod, who claimed divinity. So why did he not consider to revolt against them? And by doing so, wipe out all forms of corruption and shirk and establish in its place a dawla, al-Ilahiyya, a divinely guided state headed by Ibrahim alayhi salam himself? Then why was this not his approach? And these are important questions, ya ikhwan, to refute the da'wah of those who take this approach when it is in complete opposition. And this is a good example and proof against them. That Ibrahim alayhi salam never took this approach, even though he was faced with a government, with a leadership. They were oppressive, tyrannical, claiming divinity and lordship. And the answer is, as the Shaykh mentions, Hafidhullah Ta'ala, حاشا الأنبياء وحاشا نزاهتهم من سلوك هذه الطرق. That the prophets were far removed from following any such way or even considering it. Why? Because this is the way of the oppressors and the ignorant and the foolish, those who only seek after this wealth and strive for authority in it, those who take this way and promote this methodology of revolt and uprising, that they are only طلاب الدنيا والملك, that they are only seeking after the dunya and to gain authority in the dunya. But as for the Anbiya, as for the prophets, then they were seekers of the hereafter. They were callers to Tawheed and pioneers guiding to the truth. And they were seeking to save the people from falsehood and shirk. So when they applied themselves to correction and changing the state of affairs, and they were the most knowledgeable and intelligent of the people, then they necessarily began with striking at the true sources of shirk and misguidance. That is what Ibrahim alayhi salam, the wise and rightly guided, the heroic and brave, this is what he did. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Surah al-Anbiya, وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا إِبْرَاهِيمَ رُشْدَهُ مِنْ قَبْلُ وَكُنَّا بِهِ عَالِمِينَ. And we indeed guided Ibrahim to the truth at a young age, and we were well acquainted with him. إِذْ قَالَ لِأَبِيهِ وَقَوْمِهِ مَا هَذِهِ التَّمَاثِيلُ الَّتِي أَنْتُمْ لَهَا عَاكِفُونَ. When he said to his father and his people, then what are these idols which you worship and are devoted to? قَالُوا وَجَدْنَا آبَاءَنَا لَهَا عَابِدِينَ. So they said that we found that our forefathers were worshipping these idols. قَالَ لَقَدْ كُنْتُمْ أَنْتُمْ وَآبَاؤُكُمْ فِي ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ. He said, both you and your forefathers are upon clear and plain error. قَالُوا أَجِئْتَنَا بِالْحَقِّ أَمْ أَنْتَ مِنَ اللَّاعِبِينَ. So they said, have you come to us with the truth, or are you merely being frivolous? قال بل ربكم رب السماوات والأرض الذي فطرهن وأنا على ذلكم من الشاهدين. He said, rather I bring you the truth. Your Lord is the sole Lord and creator of the heavens and the earth. He who created you all, not any of the idols to which you are devoted. And I am a witness to the fact that none but Him is deserving of your worship. وَتَاللَّهِ لَأَكِيدَنَّ أَصْنَامَكُمْ بَعْدَ أَن تُوَلُّوا مُدْبِرِينَ. And Ibrahim alayhi salam, he said, by Allah, I intend to destroy their idols when they go off to their festival. فَجَعَلَهُمْ جُذَاذًا إِلَّا كَبِيرًا لَهُمْ لَعَلَّهُمْ إِلَيْهِ يَرْجِعُونَ. So he alayhi salam, he destroyed their idols. He broke them into pieces, except for the largest one of them, upon which is well known, that he tied the axe they had broken the others with, so that they may take heed and abandon worship of their idols, after witnessing how weak and futile they are. قالوا من فعل هذا بآلهتنا إنه لمن الظالمين. So they said upon returning, that who has done this with our gods? Whoever has done this is certainly a criminal. قالوا سمعنا فتى يذكرهم يقال له إبراهيم. So those who had heard the saying of Ibrahim alayhi salam said, that we heard a youth speaking, and he is called Ibrahim. قالوا فأتوا به على أعين الناس لعلهم يشهدون. So they said, bring him before the eyes of the people, that they may testify against him. قال بل فعله كبيرهم هذا فاسألوهم إن كانوا ينطقون. So he said alayhi salam, but rather this one, the largest of them, did it. Ask them, ask those idols who had done it to them, if they can indeed speak. فرجعوا إلى أنفسهم فقالوا إنكم أنتم الظالمون ثم نكسوا على رؤوسهم لقد علمت ما هؤلاء ينطقون. So they turned to themselves and said, that you are indeed oppressors, and you know that they are unable to speak. قال أفتعبدون من دون الله ما لا ينفعكم شيئا ولا يضركم أف لكم ولما تعبدون من دون الله أفلا تعقلون. So he said, then will you worship besides Allah Azza wa Jal that which cannot benefit you nor harm you? Woe to you and the idols which you worship besides Allah. Have you no sense to see the futility of these idols? قالوا حرقوه وانصروا آلهتكم إن كنتم فاعلين. So they said, burn him and aid your gods, if you do indeed wish to aid them and continue to worship them. قلنا يا نار كوني بردا وسلاما على إبراهيم. So we said, O fire, be cool and safe for Ibrahim. وأرادوا به كيدا فجعلناهم الأخسرين. So they wished to cause him harm, but it was they whom will be the losers. And then the Shaykh Habibullah Ta'ala, he comments and says, so Allah Azza wa Jal, He guided Ibrahim to the truth, knowing that he was fitting for it. This wise and rightly guided Prophet, that he faced corruptions in beliefs, in aqidah, and corruption in rule and authority. A nation whose thinking was degenerate, people whose minds were astray, so that they worshipped idols in the form of pieces of wood, rocks and stars. They were also ruled by a corrupt and evil government, led by a tyrant who claimed divinity, yet the people submitted to his leadership. So where was Ibrahim to begin his correction? Should he have begun by attacking the ruler, since for certain he had ruled by other than that which Allah Azza wa Jal has revealed, and he ruled with the laws of ignorance. He also openly claimed lordship and the right to make and lay down the law? Or should he have begun with correction of aqeedah? And what takes precedence? Correcting the aqeedah of the people, or removing the tyrannical ruler? Correcting the aqeedah of the nation and the aqeedah of the government. And the Quran informs us that this rightly guided prophet, the Imam of the prophets, that he began with correction of aqeedah. And that is the call to the Tawheed of Allah Azza wa Jal, and to make all worship purely and sincerely for Him alone, and fighting and wiping out shirk, and demolishing its causes, and tearing it out from the roots. So that is what he did. He called them to the Tawheed of Allah, and to renounce the worship of everything besides Him. He argued with them about this matter, and they argued with him, but he refuted them with powerful arguments and clear proofs, and he stripped them of everything they sought to use as a proof, until they admitted their wrongdoing, misguidance, and their blind following, and stubborn and fatal acceptance of the ways of their forefathers. قَالُوا وَجَدَنَا آبَاءَنَا لَهَا عَابِدِينَ. They said, we found our forefathers worshipping them, and we have followed them in that. So when Ibrahim a.s. saw obstinate following of desires and intellects as hard as rock, he made a wise and brave plan to destroy their idols. He carried out this plan with full vigor and bravery and courage. Then this heroic act incited the government and the nation against him, and they called him for judgment in public, and laid down the charge before him. So they said, is it you who did this to our gods, O Ibrahim? So he responded to them in a mocking and sarcastic manner, rather it was this one, the largest of them. Ask the idols who had done it, if they are even able to speak. So this mocking reply was like a thunderbolt, striking their imbecilic minds. Then they relapsed and said, you know that they are unable to speak. So when he had divested them of the weapon of argument, they resorted to using force, the weapon used by everyone lacking proof in every time and place. They said, burn him and aid your gods, if you do indeed wish to aid them and continue to worship them. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved His chosen and beloved friend Ibrahim, and He threw back the plot of the unbelievers upon them. We said, O fire, be cool and safe for Ibrahim. They wished to cause harm to him, but it was they whom we caused to be the losers. So the fact that Ibrahim a.s. was saved from harm in that huge fire, which Allah caused to become cool and safe for Ibrahim, was a very great sign. Indeed, one of the greatest signs of Allah Azza wa Jal, proving His prophethood, His truthfulness, and the correctness of what He came with, which was the Tawheed, and the declaration of the futility of shirk and misguidance which His people were upon. Then Allah Azza wa Jal rewarded Ibrahim a.s. for this wise da'wah and this outstanding jihad and sacrifice, as He said subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah al-Anbiya, وَنَجَّيْنَاهُ وَلُوطًا إِلَى الْأَرْضِ الَّتِي بَارَكْنَا فِيهَا لِلْعَالَمِينَ وَوَهَبْنَا لَهُ إِسْحَاقَ وَيَعْقُوبَ نَافِلَةً وَكُلًّا جَعَلْنَا صَالِحِينَ وَجَعَلْنَاهُمْ أَئِمَّةً يَهْدُونَ بِأَمْرِنَا وَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْهِمْ فِعْلَ الْخَيْرَاتِ وَإِقَامَ الصَّلَاةِ وَإِيتَاءَ الزَّكَاةِ وَكَانُوا لَنَا عَابِدِينَ. That we saved Ibrahim and Lot from their enemies, and took them to the land which we have blessed for all the worlds. And we bestowed upon him Ishaq and Ya'qub as an extra favor upon him. And we made all of them those who acted in obedience to Allah and avoided what He forbade. And we made them leaders to be followed, guiding the people according to our orders and calling them to worship and obey Allah. And we inspired them the doing of those deeds which are good, and establishment of the prayer and paying of the zakat, and they were worshippers of us alone. طيب يا إخوان, and that concludes the example of the da'wah of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And bi'ithnillahi ta'ala we'll move on in the next lesson to the example of the da'wah of Yusuf alayhi salam. ونكتفي بهذا وصلي اللهم وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين. جزاكم الله خيرا.